This is Listening with Franklin Livingston, and our guest is Margeaux Appleton.
So we have been talking about your relationship.
We do that. I accidentally knocked into the thing. And the door. Okay. We do.
His keys. So we have been talking about your relationships and your desire of having a family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your desire of having a family. But you also mentioned earlier that you'd like your kids to be baptized. Why? Well, what does baptism mean to you? Why would you want them to have some sort of religious ritual?
Yeah. There are some reasons. There are a few reasons why I've considered it. One is just the way I was raised. That could be important to my family, as well as I have talked about it with my partner, and we think it could be a good way to have it in case they would want it when they were older, because if we get them baptized, they can be in that faith and be more accepted in that faith, and then if they decide they do not want to anymore.
Wait, so when you say baptism, more like christening, right? Some people use like a kid.
Yes,
and
same thing,
that you see
I
in the
think.
Godfather movie.
Yes, with
As
the
a kid.
water, and that's just
And so would that be in a Roman Catholic church?
yes, probably. I'm not 100% sure because it's not something I've fully fleshed out. It's not something that's happening yet, so I can't say for certain. But the reason I think it could be good is because that is, at least in all of the areas I have been and grown up in, a very prevalent religion. And if they do want to be accepted into that will make it a lot easier for them to be accepted into it.
Mhm.
And if they don't want to, when they are old enough to be able to say no, then absolutely not. They don't have to, but it's just kind of setting them up to have that step done for them, because there are some churches under that faith that are pretty like, oh, you have to be baptized. And it's what my parents did to me and my partner's family did for him, and he's no longer religious and I'm no longer religious, but we're both thankful that we did get baptized in the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, so that if we ever did want to go back to that, it would be a lot more of a simple process.
So both of you do talk about faith and religion. Here, I'm going to like disintegrate them. So I'm going to keep religion out of faith. Because
Yeah.
you can be a believer, you can be faithful, the term faith, faithful to God, and still be following biblical teachings, following Jesus Christ, without having a formal relationship with any denomination.
Absolutely.
So both of you do talk about faith, and that led to this desire to get your future children baptized in a religious tradition. But why? Because you mentioned if we ever wanted to go back, or if the kids wanted to go back, or if they just want to be apart, it'll be easy. So is it more like a having some sort of citizenship? Sorry, that was a bad
Almost.
example.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is that is what happened to me and my partner, and something our families both believe in, even though his family isn't super, super religious. It's something that they were glad they did and was a good moment and a good, thing to be able to do. I think also something really important to us is saying that as something we would like to do, given that we find the right church or place of worship to do that at. I think we wouldn't just be like, okay, no matter where we end up, they're absolutely going to get baptized at whatever church is near us. I know, at least personally, and I know my partner will be in support of this, want to research the church itself. And, I want to make sure that it's not a church in which I grew up in, but doing that at a young age, then when they grow up, we can be like, hey, this is an option for you because we were able to make it an option for you. This was something that we both had and is an option if you would like to explore that, but also if not, that is okay. It just would give them a place to be a jumping off point to start exploring.
The reason I was asking, because even in my mind I was thinking about myself. I like being part of small groups.
Mhm.
And in general, in the United States, small groups are part of non denominational evangelical type churches.
Mhm.
Actually, I have been a part of a Roman Catholic church, but I don't know if it's that common. Usually, when you go to a Catholic church, I think what you hear is a mass, and it's not divided into communities and
Yeah.
activities. So these small groups, what I've noticed that no matter how conservative or broad-minded or progressive a church is, after some time they expect you to join them formally because you're still an outsider. You
Yeah.
go hang out with them, talk and all, and they know, yeah, he's not a member of our church, which is,
Mhm.
again, like a lot of people don't think like that. For
Yeah.
me, it's not a big deal, but for people, it's a big deal. And for a system, it's a big deal. And living without that system is also challenging if someone, say, wants to get married in a beautiful church building. They can't because unless you say, "Hey, priest, I'm a Catholic, or I'm ready to become Catholic. I want to get married in your church."
Absolutely.
Same. A lot of Protestant churches might do the same. No, a lot of things have become easier where people can online buy these ordinations and they can marry anyone. But when you live in a traditional community, still the expectation is that a clergy will bury you when you're going to die.
Mm.
A clergy will marry you. Clergy will
Yeah.
baptize your kids.
Yeah, I think that was something too. I was baptized, I got my first communion, and I was confirmed.
In the Catholic tradition.
In the Catholic tradition. And that's something I feel like a lot of that I did not need, but being baptized underneath the Catholic Church also does give that option for marriage under the church and under the, just locations. And I think it is just like a good foothold in where I grew up. That was a very, very popular religion, and that was most of what was around. So and that was most of the community I grew up in. So it was nice to have that foothold, even though I don't really necessarily pour my whole belief into that religion. It is nice to know that I have somewhere and that I can go to other Catholic churches and maybe find one day that works for me and be like, hey, I was actually baptized in the church, and I do, kind of have my...
I would repeat that part that maybe one day I can go and
Yeah.
find another Catholic church. And also, I think it can go beyond Catholic church. Any
Yeah.
mainline church will accept that.
So one day, if I do want to go back into that, I will be more accepted in any of the churches under that. So it's nice to know and nice to have that foothold. So I think that's the reason why I would do it more so they have a jumping off point at a place that will accept them when they want to start exploring. And I think I will, as a parent, make sure that is in a safe way and make sure before my children are introduced to the church or any specific denominational religion or anything like that, that it feels safe and feels like it's like, hey, because there are some churches that are like, hey, this is this. If you want to join this and be a part of this, by all means. But then there are some churches that are a little more like, you have to do this, 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 and this, like how I grew up. And I think that's just important that I would very heavily vet to make sure it's a place that's not going to put ideas like right or wrong completely, and more so talk about the generalization of it so that they feel free to make their own decision. That's the last thing I ever want, is for my children to feel pressed into religious beliefs. But it could be nice to have that foothold in case that is something they are interested in. And I want to give them because I always think if when I was younger, I had the opportunity to communicate how I felt and actually have someone to talk to about that stuff in the church, I think I would have, my ideas would be a little different right now. Because I didn't have good experiences and I felt for a while very kind of lost in religion. I don't really know. I had to find all this information, like claw my way by myself with no help because it wasn't supported to look at any other religions but Catholic. but also they weren't very nice in the Catholic Church. So, and that's not all Catholics or religious people at all. There are obviously different groups of each religion, but making sure that they have a safe space to grow up in where they can like be like, oh, I want to go to church this Sunday, or I don't want to go. And if they don't want to go, then they don't go. And never going to force them to go to church if they don't want to go, if they enjoy it and want to learn about it. And I'll open up like the kids stuff about it and make sure like we challenge their ideals and make sure they know that, you know, no matter what anyone says in a religious environment, that is not always the final word. And if they have questions that they don't feel like are being answered, they can always come to us and get answers to their questions or get outlets to find different answers, you know, just making sure they have that outlet to feel comfortable to do that in and explore their belief and their faith and what they want to, you know, put themselves and their devotion into.
Yeah, this the technical term I think they use is sacraments. So the sacrament of baptism is generally accepted among all the mainline churches. Catholics, Lutherans, Presbyterians, Methodists, Episcopalians.
Yes.
And the foundational theology is almost the same. I think a problem becomes where the tradition, the rituals that begin to change because of cultural influence. Lutheranism comes from Germany, Catholicism comes from Rome, and the Episcopal tradition, which is sort of Anglican and sort of not, they come from English background. So if it's about learning the basics or knowing the basic infrastructure, I think it could be from any denomination. And you're right, like you started there, so it's easy to go back. Like Moses, he started in the palace. It was easy for him to go there, although he was saying, I can't really. But he spent significant amount of time there, so you learn some norms and tradition.
Yeah.
It's like any given culture. So if you grew up in a culture, say United States, you have a particular way to drive. On the right side of the road, and certain vowels, which are different when you cross the Atlantic. So you are used to, there's some familiarity to it. And but what about moral formation? How do you see yourself? Because you saw something which wasn't really helpful. Like if you put your elbows on the dinner table, you're a sinner. Right?
Yeah.
How do you envision forming your own children's morality, basic etiquettes, manners?
I think one of the biggest things is making sure they feel heard and listened to. Because I feel like for me, one of the biggest things is I didn't feel like anyone was answering me. I would ask questions and I felt like I was just screaming into a void, and people would be like, oh, don't worry about that. No, I'm gonna worry about that. You're too young, you don't need to know that stuff. To this day, my parents keep stuff from me because they think I'm not old enough to know about the finances or their work or anything like that when I'm fully an adult and can know and would like to know about that kind of stuff. I think that I've always felt a little smaller just because I was a child and the youngest in my family, and even as I grow up I still feel smaller even though I'm not, and I have thoughts and opinions and ideas. But I think that's one of the biggest things is making sure that they know they can and they should ask questions, especially to people who are trying to tell them like complete right from wrong. You should ask questions. It's not black and white like that.
But because see, I am not directly in touch with children's development. So how do we tell a kid not to lie, not to steal, like very basic stuff, not to bully someone? And when they're really young, say 5 is the age they are in kindergarten, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe so. I think That's really hard. I think that's not something I have completely figured out yet. I am not having kids quite yet, and that is something that I still think is something I need to work on, and something my partner and I are going to sit down and talk about how we are going to go about all of those things. From what I've learned from watching kids, though, and helping them grow up, and being an almost teacher to them, is to explain things in ways that they'll understand, but that's not really exactly what I mean. Like, tell them not to lie when you say, hey, like, that can hurt other people, that can hurt you. Let them know that I'm not just telling them they can't do it because I'm their mom. I want them to question me. If I say, no, don't do that, I want them to say why. I don't want them to follow blindly anyone, and especially not me. I don't know everything.
So the logic should be there.
Yeah, and I'm going to be a parent. I'm going to be a first-time parent. I don't have it all figured out. I want them to ask questions, and if they're confused about things, I also want them to be able to feel. If they're mad about something, if we don't let them have another cookie and they're upset about it, they're allowed to be upset. They're not allowed to hit, because hitting hurts people, and you have to have gentle hands. That's a big thing I say, is like, gentle hands.
Do you see God talk in the moral formation of your children? Because when most likely people take a baby to be baptized, right, to a church, baby has no clue what's happening.
No clue.
Right. But if you continue, you go to a church and they're like 2 years, 3 years, they get some idea. We sing, we put offering, depending what tradition you go to, maybe sprinkling of water or Holy Communion.
Yeah.
So they might have questions, right? Or observations. Sometimes they have very cute observations. Was that a juice? What were you drinking, man, mommy? So where does God fit in? Because all these expressions, rituals have to do something with God.
Yeah, I think that's telling them that, like, God is a reason for a lot of these things, but also there are some questions that we cannot answer, and there are some questions that they need to figure out for themselves. As they get older, we can help them as much as we can, but they ultimately need to be the ones to decide what their views on that are, and that's why, like, exposing them to a bunch of different things, what we've talked about, my partner and I, is obviously baptizing and opening that door, but also as they get older, introducing them to other religions through people, meeting people of other religions, just to show them that there are options and that they have places to go. And I think that a big thing also comes back to, like, how you morally teach a child. I think is a big thing is children are very emotional. Children don't know emotional regulation. They were brought onto this earth and do not know what's going on, and they react very heavily. They cry, they scream, because they don't know what to do. And that's okay. And that's okay for children to do that. And I think that's a big thing, is letting them feel their emotions and helping them learn what those emotions are will help immensely. If they're mad that they can't have an extra cookie and they're screaming and crying, we're like, okay, it is very valid you are upset. It is very valid to be upset, but let's take a deep breath. Emotionally regulate. Emotional regulation is so important, and I feel like a lot of adults don't even know how to emotionally regulate when things get frantic.
Do you always teach that in theater schools?
Yeah, and it's, I think, something really important that you should teach at a young age, is that, if a kid's screaming, crying, running around the store, breaking things, they're not just being a kid. You haven't taught them how to feel their emotions, and kids lash out, kids have bad days, just like adults do. And it's just about telling them that they're little humans. They're little humans. They're not any less than us just because they're young. I feel like that's a lot of things. It's like, a lot of times, I feel like people are like, oh, well, they should listen because I'm the adult. Listen to your adults, listen to your adults, I don't want my kids to blindly follow adults. That could lead to a lot of very bad things. I don't want them to blindly follow people just because they're an adult figure. But
a lot of times what happens is children don't know who God is, right? But they are taught to pray, thank. And later on in life, they develop an idea. I hear a kid crying somewhere. So they develop
on topic.
Yeah, they develop an idea. Okay, so we gotta thank somebody who is in the control or greater power, and then maybe they develop the sense what we were talking about, the inner self, and me being the temple of God, and then
Mhm.
connecting with the higher self. But that perspective, it's easier for people to understand these bigger concepts who have some sort of foundation versus who do not. Because I have
Yeah.
friends from both the streams, and it's very difficult. There are some religions, global religions, and I have a friend. She, I think, struggles because her mom is Christian, but she had no influence of Christianity that way. She would say I'm half Christian, but then it's so difficult for her to make sense of even, I would think, of basic stuff.
Yeah. Foundations are important, but I feel like they're important in a different way than people think they are. You don't need a heavy religious foundation, but it's good to know what it is and that it's an option, and that's the most important thing I want to teach my kids, as well as, like, that they're human beings just like us
Mhm.
at this age. They are just not sure about a lot of things, and just giving them a safe space to learn and make mistakes is really, really important. And to show them that they are valid
Mhm.
and that their opinion and their voice matters even at a young age, and let them have questions, show them that, you know, because people older than you, they do have a little more wisdom than you, and it's good to take their advice, but don't blindly follow anyone just because they're an adult. If you have questions, ask them. If you are curious about things, explore it. If you heard about something in religion, like they go to school one day and they're like, well, my friend says they go to temple. Okay, great. Do you want to go to temple for a day?
Mhm.
We'll go if you want to see what that's like. You know?
One, well, before I forget, this question comes to mind. So when you're using this term options, right? Talk a little bit more about it, because someone might think, a lot of us might think, options means, for example, when you send a kid to school,
Mm-hmm.
he or she is in grade 2 and they say, I don't want to study. So do they have option to leave that and then just stick to the device, tablet, or whatever? Is that you talking
No, I
about?
mean options specifically religiously. And I think options in a lot of things, like their voice matters, but that doesn't mean they can not go to school because they don't want to. They don't want to go to school. Let's find why. A lot of kids don't like going to school because they have learning disabilities that no one pays attention to. They don't like going to school because they don't feel good. They don't like going to school because they don't feel safe at school. They don't like going to school because they don't know how to function like everyone else does, which is okay. And it's I meant more so options in the religious, like if you, for faith, you have the option to decide what you believe in. But
That's why I'm asking. Like, if a kid is too young and they don't even know what believing means,
then we would like to use general phrases more often. We're not going to have a lot of God talk. It's going to be a lot of, if we mention something religious, we're going to try and put in points from a bunch of different religions, keep it very loose, keep it very vague until they start asking questions. When they ask questions, we will tell them everything they need to know, but we don't want to ingrain stuff into their heads that could sway them so strongly one way. We want to say, like, oh, well, this is this. You may not know what this means right now, but when you're curious about it, you can ask. And then when they're like, oh, like, I heard this today, I remember you talking to me about it. Can we talk more about this? What does this mean?
So
Even like I have a little cousin, he's 2, and we were doing something, and
so and this currently he's 2.
yes,
Oh,
he's currently 2, adorable, but he not as much so religious because that's not my kid. That is not my place to go
Sure.
about that religiously. But showing him things and learning things. He's learning things, and he saw something, and he was like, "Mommy told me about that a while ago. What does that mean?" And I was like, "Oh, it was about like a certain type of car and what they do like on the road, like a crash." I think he mentioned. We said crash in a sentence, and he was like, "Car crash," and we were like,
Mhm.
"Car crash?"
Mhm.
He was like, their cars can crash. And they're like, yeah, when a car crashes, it means a car can hit into something or another car and people can get hurt. Car crashes are not good, but they happen. And it's important to, like, when you think about people driving, make sure people are being very safe, or he also, like, his emotional regulation is incredible. He we were getting ready to do something, and his dad accidentally, like, hit him with a bag or something, like, as he was walking by, because he didn't see that he was right there. He got very upset, and the little boy was just very, very hurt and crying, and he was very sad. I was like, did that really hurt? And he said, no, but Daddy hurt me, and I didn't like that he did that. And I was like, okay, do you think Daddy meant to do that? And he was like, no. I was like, okay, but it's okay. And he's like, but I'm sad. And I was like, that's okay. He's like, it's okay to be sad when he didn't mean to hurt me. I was like, yes, it absolutely is okay to be sad. And I said, do you still love Daddy? And he was like, absolutely. He was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, is he still, like, one of your favorite people? He's like, yeah. Like, do you still want to go give him a hug? He was like, yeah. I was like, okay, it's okay that you're sad, as long as you know that he didn't do it on purpose to hurt you, and that he loves you, that you're allowed to feel these emotions. And I gave him a big hug, and I held his hand, and we walked in, and he went up to his dad, and he was like, I'm sad. And he said, yeah, did that hurt? And he said, yeah, it hurt. And he was like, okay, I didn't mean to. He said, I know. And I was like, I still love you very much. And he was like, I love you too. And it was more articulate than a conversation I've seen a lot of adults have. And just because he was so curious, and he asked, he was like, but I'm sad. Can I be sad? And he's two, and he obviously was a little bit more broken speech, but you were like, absolutely, yes, you are allowed to feel these things. And he heard something that was brought up to him in generalization, and then he was like, well, you said this, what does this mean? What's that? What's that? What's that? And starts asking more and more and more and more questions. And I think that's important. And that's really how I want to raise my kids, in making sure that they ask questions, and that I give them guidelines, but the guidelines are going to be very even to multiple things. I'm not just going to tell them what I believe they should feel like, or how I would feel in that situation, because I'm not them. And I don't know exactly everything they're going through, because even though I'm their parent and around them all the time, I'm not in their little brain. They're probably so confused with what's going on. Their body's growing, their teeth are coming, they're running around, they're falling, they're hurting themselves, they're going to big girl school, like, it's all this stuff is happening, right? And it's just important that they know that with everything, there is also something else to consider. And I think that's really important, giving them, like, letting them know that, it's not good to hurt people, but there's a thing called self-defense. Like, there are cases in which not every good thing is always divinely good, and not every bad thing is always bad. It's showing them, guiding them to right from wrong, while making sure they can figure it out themselves, and not just making sure they're always stuck in right, because if you don't make any wrongs, you're not going to learn from it, and you're not going to progress as a person.
Don't worry, I'm coming back.
And I'll share something, because these kids in the hallway remind me of our neighbors, not here. The kids actually became friendly with us when these are two siblings. The guy was 3 and his sister was 2, and they stayed for a couple of years. They're from Muslim background. They're from Islam, right? And the kids would, while talking, would say, "Oh, you don't lie. God doesn't like liars." And I was like, "How do you know that? Our mom taught us." No, I don't think they understand where is God, who God is.
Yeah, but
they have some idea that
kids are very impressionable.
Right.
That's why I think, like, teaching them not to lie is good, but telling them don't lie because God said so can cause a whole another thing, in the sense of, you can teach them right from wrong without making it seem like there's repercussions, or someone will be upset with them if they make a mistake. And I think that's something really important, is making sure they know that if they make a mistake, that they could crash our family car at 16 when they get their license, and I would not. I'd be upset about the car. I'd not be mad at them, because they wouldn't be doing it on purpose, and that it's like, want to make sure they always feel comfortable talking to me about anything and feel comfortable making mistakes. Mistakes are important and they should feel comfortable making those. And that's why like teaching them things is important, but also letting them know that there are a lot of influences behind that thing. That, you know, some people say this, some people say this, some people say this is the reason. And when you repeat that enough and they articulate that and get a little bit older, they can say, oh, this reminds me of that one time you said this affects this. How? Why? Who is...
Tell me something here. What's the role in your mind when it comes to children development? The roles of biblical stories? Because I've seen in some Catholic churches, colorful kids' Bible. It's not full Bible, but there are some stories. This is Jeremiah. This is Moses. This is Abraham. And it's a very shortened story.
I think personally I would like to keep that out until they decide that that's something they'd be interested in. They're like, oh, these people at school have children's Bibles and I would like to do that. Okay, when you're old enough to decide that, yes. I think until then it'll be I wouldn't...
Until what age?
It depends on the kid until they are curious. Until they start asking the
questions. Because I think they'll be only curious if you baptize them in a tradition. Say Catholic Church. Or
and
whatever.
They'll definitely be introduced to little things and I'll be like, oh, if we get a...
Children's curiosity could only develop if they get introduced to a book, the Bible. Like, for example, until I walked into a Catholic church, I did not know such a thing is there, available there. So when a kid is baptized, they would not know. But if you are actively part of a church, you're going there, it doesn't matter once a week or quarterly, and a kid sees that book, they might be curious that mommy or daddy will read that book to you.
Absolutely. And I think there's also some great books, none that I can think of off the top of my head. I don't want to, that are children's books about religion and go through a handful of different religions and are like, oh, these are the religious texts for each of these religions. So I think if I were to introduce a religious text, it wouldn't just be for one religion. I think that would be important to me to make sure they're like, oh, this is like what you got baptized in, look at this children's Bible, but also there are these other religious texts in children's forms, and we will read them all to you, because what if one clicks? What if they get older and they really resonate with a different one of the religious texts?
But it will be more, I'm assuming it will be more like fairy tale bedtime storybooks, because at that age they can't really...
Oh, absolutely not. I'm not going to sit down with like the Torah and read them excerpts, but there are children's versions of a lot of religious texts, just like kind of outlining it and being, okay, kids, like this is this, like a beginner.
Giving them an intro.
And giving them an intro, which I definitely would like to do, but with many a religion. And I can't commit to doing all of them because there are so many, but a handful of ones prevalent around our area, as well as maybe a book with all of them in it, to be like, hey, someone who reads this religious text and someone who reads this religious text, you can still sit together at school and still be friends. And it's okay to not know what religious text you like, obviously in kid terms. And I think that's important, is that definitely exposure to religion, but not exposure to one specific religion. Constantly drilling that. I just think they should have the freedom a little bit more to gravitate towards what they feel they should gravitate towards. And that only comes with having those options to do so.
So you were someone who was baptized in a Catholic tradition.
Yes, which I do not remember.
It's okay. You went through catechism, probably. You did use that term when I have music. Then you were confirmed. Mm-hmm. You took your first communion. That's the way it works, right?
Yes.
In Catholic Church.
I did my first communion. I did my confessional, and then I did.
What is confessional?
Before you have your first communion, and before you get confirmed, you have to go to a confessional.
The confession box?
In the confession, you have to go to one to be able to get.
And you told everything?
No, I didn't. I honestly, it was weird. I don't really love the confession box because it doesn't feel like I can actually confess anything.
Because someone is listening. The confessional, you call it the confessional?
Yeah, the confessional I've never really loved, because it feels like I'm being put in front of someone who has always told me right from wrong is how am I supposed to confess things that I am not supposed to do as a younger teen, even elementary school. Like, as kids, you do things that are wrong sometimes just because you want to see what happens and you make a mistake. And it's like,
So after going through some stages of getting affirmed in the faith,
mhm.
whether or not you liked it, you have your own way of your faith development or the way you profess your faith.
Mhm.
And you don't identify with a traditional religion.
Not at this moment in time.
No,
I think
right.
I just got freed from the pressing Catholic beliefs when I left for college
Mhm.
about 2.5 years ago. So I think before that I started slowly but surely backing away from it. But after 18 years, it's only been 2.5 years, and I think I need to explore like I was never able to when I was younger. I think I need to get that experience of learning about other religions. I definitely feel like I need to explore religion more. Denominational religion, but also just religion as a whole, as a faith, as a belief system. I wasn't really given other perspectives on that at all, and I want to know. I'm curious, and I can't figure out what I believe in unless I explore a bunch of options for that. And I think that's really important and something that I'm actively doing. And I know there is some resentment in me from my past with religion, and I think that I'm really excited to continue learning and find really what I believe in on my own, and find the place I fit in religion as a whole and religion denominationally in a way that makes me feel comfortable and safe and supported. And religion is supposed to lift you up and make you feel closer to a community and closer to yourself. And it's never been that for me. And I'm really excited to hopefully find where it does that for me.
You have a clear understanding of God. That's what I got. You have a clear understanding of Jesus Christ. What about the Holy Spirit? Because the tradition you grew up in, this all is well managed.
Yeah. I think I don't know, I think with how I grew up, a lot of it was grouped into like the Trinity together more than the Trinity apart. And the Holy Spirit being like the pressing faith and belief. And it's never really something that the Trinity as a whole is never really something that the church I grew up in got into much, except being like, oh, God is here, Jesus is God's Son, and the Holy Spirit is
But
the
if you
essence
could
of
say
everyone.
apart and within, so I think you might know way more than a lot of people.
Yes.
Because in the theory, when we read creeds and liturgy of the denominational churches, it's very theoretical. And
Yeah.
usually it's all combined, or I don't know how you use that phrase, I forgot. But when you said apart, means you know more
Yeah,
than
and
many
I've
other people.
also, it has only been 2.5 years, but I have really tried during that 2.5 years to do a lot of research, do a lot of sitting with my thoughts and talking to people with different religions, reading some religious texts. It's just, I want to know more, and I want to know more than a lot of people do, because I feel as though not everyone, I feel as though people follow religion blindly, no matter what religion that is. I feel like if you grow up in a house where you're like, oh, well, I gotta follow this religion because that's what I grew up as.
There is always a need. I mean, I think
I need to like fit in with the
fit
community
in
and impress
or
family.
getting something. Some people do that just to get some validation because I am highly respected, and this happens more in the other states than the city, where I know like okay, I'm highly respected by my church council because I am the chair of so and so. Same thing is like, oh, I'm gonna get married. I need a pastor, so it's easy if I'm just part of this church. And then my parents are elderly; they want prayer. There could be tons of reasons. I have seen very, very few people. Probably you can count them on your fingertips, who are a part of a church just because they want to learn and grow and explore.
Yeah.
Mostly have some sort of agenda and marry or bury or child
Yeah, they kind of
baptism.
want something out of it, which I don't think is a great reason to believe in a certain religion just because you want something out of it. If you think like believing in God is going to solve all of your problems, it's not in any religion. It's not just going to poof, everything in your life is going to be better because you declare you
But
are
just
something.
sorry to interrupt again, but I don't think a lot of people belong to these groups assuming God is going to solve our problems. It's more like, especially when it comes to denomination, okay, I'm a part of a knitting group. I'm a part of a card making group. I'm a retiree. Mostly retirees do that.
Mhm.
They find a sense of community.
Oh,
And they talk
absolutely.
about that more than God.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you
working
meant
in
for
me.
like the joining of. I've just seen that a lot, and it's been a lot of like, at least in the church I was in, they mentioned a lot of like, oh, you need to join. And if you join, all your problems will go away
That's
because
the
you'll return
selling
the many.
pitch, sales pitch.
Absolutely.
Because churches have become such a great business, and
Yes.
which is a
Yeah.
sad reality, but
It is very sad.
they want your money and
They do.
they got to sell something, and that's the way they sell. Some sell
And I think there are good
prosperity
ways
gospel.
for churches to get money, and there's some not great ways. I will say the one great thing my church always did was we had like the Christmas bazaar, it was called, which was around the holidays. A bunch of booths were set up, and you came in and donated stuff, and then people could come in and donate like all week. Donate toys, donate clothes, donate jewelry, knickknacks, and then also 3 families would bake and cook and bake for days and days, and they would do some like raffles and stuff, and then they'd open it up and you could come buy stuff, like kind of like a flea market thrift type thing, and all of the proceeds went towards presents for children who could not afford presents, or presents for kids who did not have anything, and everything that wasn't sold was also packed up in boxes and sent to orphanages and
Right.
stuff like that, which is a great thing and a great sense of community, and is awesome that they did. And I would say that is the one thing that they did it once a year, and it was very exciting, and the one thing I was excited to be a part of every year. I worked it every single year because it was something I felt really passionate about. If anything, in all of that growing up religious, I knew that I wanted to give back and to be able to help others, and that was a great way to do that.
I'm gonna build upon that. So this feeling
Mm-hmm.
of gratification, giving back, or we earlier talked about having a conviction. That's also a feeling. It all happens inside.
Yeah.
Doing justice, being humble, being caring, being supportive. We talked all about that. Isn't that the Holy Spirit that's at work?
Yes, that like feeling inside of you. Yeah, and I think I've just always been again very empathetic person. I've always wanted to give, even like, and not in the sense of like, oh, I want to give so people think I'm a good person. I just genuinely do enjoy helping people. I enjoy people leaning on me. I love it. Like, I'm the main person all my friends come to for advice, because I listen and try and help in a non-biased way as much as I can. Just be like, hey, you said this. Have you thought about this? And why you're feeling that way? And have you thought about maybe like thinking about it from a different perspective? Not, oh yeah, girl, like you're so right, he's so wrong, ever in any situation. When people come to me for advice, I really
So you bring more order in the lives of others rather than creating chaos.
Yeah, I bring more like of a center point and more of a, instead of letting people kind of like spiral or think things, it's like, okay, there's a reason behind things. If you're feeling a certain way, let's figure out why and fix it, or just talk to me if you just need to get it off your chest. I love to talk, if you can't tell, to people, and I love to hear people's experiences and also just learn from others. I think it's so important to talk and to listen and to absorb, and to put yourself in someone else's shoes, like we were talking about earlier, the sense of thinking about something from someone else's perspective, not necessarily giving sympathy, but just being empathetic and thinking from a different perspective. And I think that's really what it takes, and that's really important and something I feel very strongly about.
Earlier today, you used this term godly. I think I was making fun of this language. Some community series loves the Lord. He or she is very godly. And I forgot what you mentioned. But isn't that what godly means? Trying to be good, doing good, sharing goodness, bringing order out of a chaos, mending ways, helping people rejoin,
Yeah.
being empathetic. The biggest thing in the Christian doctrine, doesn't matter, it's Catholic or any other denomination,
Yes.
is God's incarnation through Jesus Christ in a great humility, which is major. Right?
Yeah, and I think, yes, in a way that is godliness, but I also think God and the stigma of God has been twisted in ways that that's not like the word I like to use, because that feels very religious when it almost shouldn't be.
It's the same thing like we talked about the term sin.
Yeah, and so it's just things that I avoid, because at this point in time I don't think they're good words to use. But yes, I do think that that is in a way being godly. Being godly, not trying to be godly.
Yeah.
Being godly is different than trying to be a god.
That's
and
that's pretending.
Yes,
That's
pretending, or like
truthful.
thinking you are this powerful person with these great ideals. I mean, I'm not, I don't think I'm perfect. I have so many flaws. I bet I've given bad advice many times. If any of my friends are watching this, sorry if I've ever led you down the wrong path, but
so that's a confession, but there wasn't a confession box. You did that like a live confession.
But that's also something I'm very, when I talk to people, and if people ask for my opinion, I'm very much so like, hey, this is my opinion for a reason. This is my opinion. I don't want you to take this as gospel right now. I want you to listen to what I'm saying and think from a different perspective. But at the end of the day, I just offer that as a bouncing off point, or just another, hey, you've talked a lot about this. You haven't mentioned this, but I think it could be really good for you to think about this thing in effect and why you could be feeling like this, instead of, spiraling down that path. And I'm always like, I will never tell someone what to do if they're asking me for advice. I will never be like, oh, you should leave them, you should this, or oh, this, that, because that is not my decision to make. Nothing anyone does is my decision to make, but all I can do is be like, hey, think about it this way. Whatever conclusion you come up with, I'm going to support you wholeheartedly. Whatever decision you make, I'm going to support you. But, you've been thinking a lot about this. Maybe put this on your radar. And maybe put these 3 things on your radar. Just open up to them. And I know I've had friends come back and be like, hey, you mentioned those things. They were really great points, but they really didn't resonate with me. Okay, great. That's totally fine. But sometimes they do resonate. And that's something I learned from my dad a lot, too, is he offers wisdom without trying to coach me through a situation for a certain outcome. He will never tell me not to do something. Unless it was like, really gonna put me in physical danger. If I ask my dad if I should do something, his answer is always yes. Because if you want to do it, you have an inkling to do it, figure it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If you want to try a new hobby, try it. If it's bad, like, I love crocheting. I think it's awesome. Can't crochet for shit. Cannot crochet. Terrible, horrible at it. But that doesn't mean I didn't try, and still every few months I'll pick it up and try again just because. But yeah, I think that is a really big thing, is having openness to be able to talk to someone and give tidbits. Like I said with my dad, he will never, even if he doesn't think it's a good idea, he will never tell me not to do something. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be my decision. He just says, hey, I understand where you're coming from, and if you do it, you do it, but these are just a few things to consider that maybe you haven't thought about. And sometimes I'm like, I thought about them, and I go ahead and do it, and it's great. Sometimes I thought about them, I go ahead and do it, and it's awful, and I end up in tears calling him, and he's never once said I told you so. He's just like, okay, that's a learning point for next time. Next time when you're faced with a situation like that, maybe we take a different route. Maybe we try something else. It's all about learning. No one can tell you what to do. You're not, you're never going to be a perfect person, even if someone tells you exactly what move to make every decision you make in your life. It's going to be about listening to other people's stories and understanding how you don't know the whole story and how you never will get the entire worldview on anything. So when there's an issue, I'm never going to give someone like, oh, this is what I think you should do. I will always give them, hey, here are some things you maybe haven't thought about, and it could be good to, or like a big one I say to my friends a lot is like, you're valid for feeling this way. And they're like, well, what do I do? You don't need to do anything. You're upset. You're allowed to be upset. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be fine. If something happens and it makes you sad, you don't have to pretend like you're fine all the time. You're allowed to be angry, especially if I've found the stigma with women is like, they feel like they're not allowed to get upset about things because they're women and they're supposed to be very calm. No. Female rage. You're allowed to get upset. You're allowed to get upset about anything. You're allowed to be sad. Everyone is allowed to feel every emotion they feel, It doesn't give you a right to act out, but if something happens and you're sad, you don't need to, oh, well, I want to feel better for this person. No, you don't need to do that. You just need to feel your feelings. And if someone cares about you, they'll understand your feelings. They'll understand that you're sad. Doesn't mean you're mad at them. Doesn't mean you hate them. It just means you're sad. Something happened and it made you sad, and that's okay. You're allowed to be sad. You don't have to always be happy. You're allowed to have feelings. I think that's so important and a really big thing that, like, I feel like a lot of people don't realize. You're allowed to feel, and that's a big thing. Coming back to anything, you absolutely can pray to a higher being, but you're also just allowed to feel sad and hopeless sometimes. You don't have to turn to something, and if you'd like to, you absolutely can, but it's not the only option. You're allowed to also just blatantly feel.
We have a whole section, like you talked about, you're allowed to, you said pray or to higher being? How did you phrase it?
Yeah, if you want to, like, if that's where you want to turn your energy when you're upset about things, you can, but I feel like there are sometimes, like, when I was younger, people were like, oh, if you're upset, just talk to God. But I don't want to talk to God. I just want to be mad. I don't want to be better. I just want to be sad for 10 minutes. Just let me...
It's so interesting you say that, because when we read the New Testament, we see Jesus Christ being upset, showing his anger, being sad, and he was extremely worried. I use that word because he used that word before his crucifixion, and then he prayed. So Jesus Christ wasn't an emotionless person.
Yes.
Right? So I don't know why. And it goes back to the same thing that people pick and choose, and then they develop their own belief system.
Yes. It's very picky choosy and very, like, when you come into a house of worship and people will tell you what their beliefs are. And it's hard when you're not in a good place not to take that as like, oh, well, this is either what I need to do or this is what someone's pushing on me. And it's just,
First time I talked to you was on a video call.
Yes.
And I asked this question, I phrased it this way: do you identify yourself with any religion? And then somehow you mentioned you didn't have a good influence of religion as growing up, and I asked which tradition, and you mentioned Catholic Christian. Today we spent a lot of time talking about a lot of things, and some of the language, some concepts, it was not easy for you to revisit. But how was it overall? How would you encourage those people who are confused, or so there are people extremely hurt by traditions, many churches, traditions, abused by churches and traditions. So how would you encourage them that whatever these traditions have offered us, everything is not bad?
Yeah, I think I encourage that just because you have a rough past doesn't mean you have to have a rough future in anything, but especially religion-wise. Trust me, I know how it feels to be felt kind of abused by a religious organization and religion, and the first thing I want to do is be like, oh, I want to be this, that, I want to be the furthest thing from this. I'm going to look at like this, that, I'm an atheist, like, which was just kind of like me angrily trying to be like, oh, I want no part of that, which is okay. But I encourage people to start fresh with religion and explore the overarching ideals of faith and belief in a way that feels good to you, and start slowly whittling that down to maybe something that starts to feel good. And it can start really, really slow just by thinking, is there like a higher energy, and all of that kind of stuff. I think it's just encouraging to take that back for yourselves. I think it took me a long time to realize that I could change my future with religion.
And
by
maybe
just taking it in my own
revisiting
hands.
the text that has been talked at us.
Oh, absolutely. It's
Or
just
we just
research.
heard the perspectives. And if you don't have a lot of time, just start with simple. Like we talked about few verses. And what do they mean to us, today's world?
Yeah.
And
It's just
maybe starting really,
starting
really,
very
really
small.
small. Yeah.
Just starting exploring, letting your self take you wherever it wants to go on that journey,
Mhm.
and making peace with that and healing yourself, I think, in a way. If you've had hazardous pasts with religions,
Mhm.
you are not alone, and
Mhm.
you are supported, and there is an entire community of people
Mhm.
just like you who feels hurt by religion. And that does not mean religion needs to be out of your life forever,
Mhm.
but if that's what you want, that's also okay.
Yeah.
But you can start taking it back slowly but surely, in little ways. Start figuring out what it means to you, how certain things feel, what you find yourself doing in times of peril.
Mhm.
I don't find myself praying, but I find myself being like, okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath. My energy is really high right now, and if I'm frantic, it's gonna convey into the things I'm doing. So I need to center myself first, and just, getting back in yourself and letting yourself reform an identity that was almost taken from you,
Hmm.
and knowing that you can't erase that past, but you can go forward, and that doesn't have to hold you back forever. I think that's really important to remember.
Margot, it was a delight having you
Thank
with
you
us
so
today.
much.
It was great learning about you,
Thank you.
your journey, your struggles, your celebrations, and your future endeavors.
Thank you very much. It was so nice
Best
speaking to you.
wishes.